Welcome to the Half Empty, Half Full radio show on the Starcom and Tan Talk Radio Network with your host, Laurie Zoock, the consumer champion. All opinions are that of the host and guests. Do you have a story idea? Contact us on our Facebook page, Half Empty, Half Full. We want to hear from you. And now, your host, the consumer champion, Laurie Zoock.
Welcome to the show. Each week, we'll be discussing problems and solutions, changing negatives to positives, and helping you, the consumer, to get smarter faster. My guests today are Mitch, Lindsey, and Attila Hevesy from the Dominion Property Group, LLC. And we're going to be talking about what you as a consumer need to know about walking away from your home in foreclosure and some options you may not know about. So if your home is in foreclosure, pre-foreclosure, please stay with us for the show. I want to welcome both of you to the show. And I'll start with you, Mitch. Share with our listeners a bit about yourself and your background.
Well, I recently moved to Florida. I love Florida. Absolutely wonderful here. I love what we do. I've been an entrepreneur most of my adult life and came across a pretty phenomenal opportunity in real estate in Florida. And so I've been doing this the last couple of years and not only helping a lot of homeowners, but set myself up to make some money as well.
All right. Yeah, very good. All right. And Attila, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm also an entrepreneur. My specialty has always been in the areas of teaching and training teams of people for Fortune 500 companies. And I did some part-time real estate investing as well in the 2000s. Didn't work out exactly how I expected, but we'll talk about that later, I guess.
That's right. I don't think it worked out for most people the way that they expected, before everything went up. Mitch, let me go to you. Talk about who the Dominion Property Group is and what do you do?
Well, Dominion Property Group is a purchaser of single-family residential homes in Florida. But we have kind of a unique market. We work primarily with homeowners, although we have done other acquisition strategies as well. But primarily we're working with homeowners who are in distress and who are faced with challenges and not really very good options in terms of what they do when they're in the midst of a foreclosure. So we offer an alternative, a very viable alternative, one that we believe is a win-win situation for both the homeowner and for us.
Great. Now, how long has Dominion Property Group been in business?
Well, actually, Dominion Property Group was recently formed. It's we were working under an entity called Dominion Research Group, and it didn't quite the name didn't quite convey what we do. So we've just recently switched to Dominion Property Group. But even then, we're relatively new. We've been doing this a couple of years. Started coming over to Florida and finding some property and buying some property. Made some phenomenal buys, and we've had some great success. And frankly, recently we implemented a new strategy to work directly with homeowners as opposed to some of the other acquisition strategies that we were previously using.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Well, I want to talk about, the bubble bursting. We kind of just touched on that briefly in your intro, Attila. What happened? Was it the bank's fault, the homeowner's fault, or both? Either one of you.
Well, I'll go ahead and address that. Sure. It's kind of interesting. There's been some misunderstanding, absolute misunderstanding about the causes of the bubble. And so there have been certain political parties, for instance, and political groups that have tried to blame the homeowner and say that the banks were forced to lend to people they shouldn't have lent to and that homeowners took out more mortgages than they should have. And while there is some truth to that, the truth is the real fault lies with the banking industry. The securitization of mortgages was an out-and-out scheme and scam designed to rob the economy of literally billions upon billions of dollars. And so it wasn't that we had homeowners in search of mortgages they couldn't afford. We had banks in search of homeowners to take on mortgages they couldn't afford because the banks were making a lot of money. So I frankly lay the blame for the economic meltdown, the crisis that we're currently in, the mortgage foreclosure crisis, directly at the feet of the banking industry and Wall Street and the search for absolutely unconscionable profits.
Right. And you know what? I'm actually going to agree with you. I think the same thing. And even though homeowners may have signed off, first off, most of them don't even understand what they're signing because it's written in legalese. It's not written for a regular person to read, and plus, attorneys can interpret contracts differently. But I do agree with you on the banking part of it. And if you look at our country, which just keeps printing up money, I think most countries actually set a poor example. And that's why even with the banking crisis, with the housing crisis, you have countries that have gone bankrupt, right? Italy, I think, and Spain have both gone bankrupt in part because of the securitization and those mortgages and loans being sold off to other countries, to their investors.
It has to do with the same concept of everything being a debt-based economy. And so most people really have no comprehension of the kind of profits that securitization brought to Wall Street and the banking industry. So again, these were not homeowners in search of mortgages. These were literally, for instance, here in Florida, they hired 10,000 people to go door to door to solicit mortgages. Many of those even were ex-felons and convicted felons and all kinds of things because they were Wall Street had an appetite for these mortgages to place into securitization pools. Some 65 million residential mortgages throughout the country were placed in these pools. And again, the money to be made was massive. Maybe we can get into some little illustration, but it has nothing to do with what the homeowner did. It had everything to do with the amount of money that can be made by every party in every piece of the securitization chain. So from the originator to the broker, the depositor to the all the way up to Wall Street itself, the money that was being siphoned off was huge.
All right. Well, I still find it scary. Now, Attila, most homeowners in foreclosure status, they tend to panic. So when you're talking to someone that's come to you for help, what is the emotional feeling? Forget about the money. We already know you're in trouble financially if you're going to go into foreclosure or in foreclosure. How do most people feel when they're talking to you? Are they panicking?
Well, there's an array of emotions, Laurie. I mean, it's anxiety, fear. Frankly, a lot of them are frozen by the fear, and they could make a move, but they don't do anything, and they end up losing the house because they just don't know what direction to go in. So it feels like a major 20,000 pounds on your shoulders. So I could sense the stress. I went through a situation which I could get into in more detail later on, but I know the feeling. It's not fun, and it just goes on and on and on and on, although things are speeding up quite a bit now.
Right.
We could address that as well, but it's just not fun. So I sense a lot of frustration, anxiety, fear from the folks we deal with and try to help.
And I think one of the things is when people panic, and yes, some of them do stick their head in the sand because they don't know which way to go. And then how do you find the information for what's legitimate? And sure, you can look on the internet. Sure, plenty of people look on Craigslist. That's even scarier to me. But people panic because they don't know what information is correct. What source is it coming from? Which way to go? And everybody has a different opinion. So, Mitch, let me go back to you. When does the foreclosure process actually start? Because, I've had people call me up and go, oh, my God, I got served and I've got to be out of my house in 20 days. That's the thought. Yeah, you're laughing, but because we know that's not true, correct?
That's not true. But the foreclosure process definitely has been accelerated in the state of Florida. So once the default occurs, then the mortgage company, which is typically a servicer and often not the real party that in interest that has the right to foreclose, but we'll come back to that, can turn it over to a law firm and they will proceed with a foreclosure action. So Florida is a judicial state. All foreclosures must be undertaken through a court action. So the court action is filed, a summons is issued, and it's delivered to the homeowner. Now what the homeowner has, though, is 20 days to respond to that summons. And situations changed a little bit in Florida. Florida is moving more to becoming almost a non-judicial state with the status of the law. So they passed a law recently called the Florida Fair Foreclosure Act. And one of the things I've learned about government is whatever they name it, it's the exact opposite.
Of what they do.
Yes, right.
They exclude themselves from all their own rules.
Right, and then so if they call it fair foreclosure, it's absolutely unfair foreclosure. It was written for the benefit of the banks. It was written to greatly accelerate the foreclosure process in Florida. So there's almost a presumption now under the law that the bank is correct. And so you have 20 days to respond and basically show cause as to why the foreclosure should not be allowed to happen. So the whole process used to be that it could take several years for a foreclosure to complete in Florida, even on a default. A default where there was no answer would take a year. That's all changed with the rocket dockets, the advent of senior judges being brought back to handle these special foreclosure courts. The legislature, under the pressure of the financial industry, greatly accelerated the process and basically are trampling on over homeowner rights in these rocket dockets. So the process is greatly accelerated. So now we're literally seeing foreclosures happen in a 6 to 12 month period, far quicker than they used to happen. And so people need to understand that and understand that their options have accordingly changed. And so they need to get a game plan together fairly quickly and move with that in terms of whether they want to stay in the house, whether they want to maybe take advantage of something like we offer. There's all kinds of options, but they don't have the kind of time that they used to have to be able to move.
Right. Now we're going to take a quick break, so stay with us. You won't want to miss it. Back in a...
Time after time, I've done my sentence, but committed no crime. And bad mistakes.
Do you suffer from back, neck, or body pain? Do you suffer from migraines or have jaw or face pain? Has conventional medicine failed you? Were you injured or in an accident? Call chiropractic physician Dr. Dan Maddock at 813-935-1664. Dr. Dan has helped thousands of patients gain relief for more than 30 years. Dr. Dan is caring, gentle, and takes his time with each patient. He's also a past president of the International Craniopathic Society, a special certification of only 300 chiropractors worldwide. Dr. Dan helps patients from the neck up and the neck down. Dr. Dan accepts most insurance plans. Don't continue to live in pain. Call 813-935-1664 today. That's 813-935-1664 and get on track to better health.
Are your credit reports a mess? Are debt collectors hounding you? Maybe you're in foreclosure or headed towards foreclosure and don't know where to turn. It's time to stop panicking. Take back control of your life. Make the first step by calling Credit Education Consultants today at 813-500-6064. That's 813-500-6064. Mention the word radio for a free 15-minute consultation. Don't delay. Call today.
I've paid my dues time after time.
Welcome back to the Half Empty, Half Full Talk radio show. I'm speaking today with Mitch, Lindsey, and Attila Hevesy from the Dominion Property Group. If you're in a foreclosure or pre-foreclosure situation, you're going to want to stay tuned to the show. These gentlemen have some interesting information, and we're gonna kind of get it out of them. So, Mitch, you were talking about the rocket docket, which is basically when the judges they don't want it on their docket. There really is no justice. You, the homeowner, are pretty much wrong, and we're going to just get these hundreds of daily cases off of our docket so that we don't have to do anything, rather than give the homeowner justice. Now, maybe if the homeowner has a good lawyer, but I think a lot of lawyers here just want to stall tactic it out because they really don't know how to fight it, or they think, hey, the judges really don't care. So why do you think that the judges rarely rule on behalf of the homeowner?
Well, again, it comes back to the position the legislature has taken. They've issued a mandate to the foreclosure courts to rid Florida of its backlog of foreclosures. So, for instance, a little over a year ago, you probably had close to 300,000 active foreclosure cases in the state of Florida. Now that number is down to about 205, 206, somewhere along in there. So they've eliminated literally almost 100,000 cases, plus whatever new cases had come along in terms of number. So the courts are operating under the assumption that the bank has a right to foreclose. Frankly, the deck is stacked against the homeowner. It's not about justice. It's about expediency and ridding the courts of the cases. So it's very, very difficult for a homeowner to find justice, even if they find an attorney. And there are a lot of good attorneys. Most attorneys typically approach the case from a delay perspective, looking to keep the homeowner in the home as long as possible. That time period has shortened considerably from what it used to be, so it's not really a very viable strategy for most people, at least not to pursue long term. It might be short term. There's very few attorneys that understand truly how to fight a bank foreclosure and win. And frankly, again, the deck is stacked against the homeowner. So,
well, the homeowner has to pay. They have to have money, and they're already in a troubled situation. How can they possibly afford an attorney? Because most of them charge a monthly fee, which is usually around the amount that their mortgage was, which they don't have to begin with. We're back on that circle, right? You're laughing, but that's the truth. They don't have it. And the only other option, for them, they could try to represent themselves pro se. But hey, do you think when the judge knows that you're pro se and you don't know the civil rules of procedure, what's that going to get you?
Nowhere except a foreclosure. Mm-hmm. And even with an attorney, the judges are predisposed to grant the foreclosure. The courts are predisposed. Everything is moving to get the foreclosure, not justice, but to get the foreclosure.
Right. Now, interestingly, and I'm not sure what state it was in, but I did read a story recently about a case where the defendant's attorney found out that the judge owned stock in the bank that happened to be foreclosing. That was the plaintiff.
Yep.
And was able to bring that information forward. Initially, supposedly, the judge did not want to recuse himself, but ultimately did end up doing so. So then I sit back and I go, okay, well, how many judges own stock, or IRAs that are in those banks? Isn't that automatically a conflict of interest? And shouldn't that make them recuse themselves? But that's just my opinion.
Well, it's absolutely correct. But the reality is that many of these judges do own bank stocks, as well as anybody that's invested in a pension fund or some type of a retirement fund probably has some bank stock somewhere. So the reality is getting a recusal is a difficult process.
Gotcha. All right. Now, Attila, we're talking about the banks having a lot more power and money than the homeowner does. Is that why so many people get frustrated and walk away, from what you've seen?
Yeah, they just feel helpless because in a lot of these instances, people will attempt to do, for example, a loan modification. And they see very, very quickly that they're just kind of spinning their wheels and it's going nowhere. I have a personal experience with that where I was in foreclosure and I sent in the paperwork and the documents several times, at least 2 or 3, after being requested the documents over again. And then after the 5th time, I just kind of said, I'm really wasting my time here.
Yeah.
And I actually wrote them a letter and saying, I am withdrawing this loan modification.
Because they can't get their act together, right?
No, well, it's deliberate. It's a stall tactic. And when you think about it, what the bank is really doing when they do a loan modification, in a lot of instances, is they're gathering and finding out and discovering where your assets are so they can build a case against you. But the average person doesn't realize that.
No, they're trying to get the documents together. But I've heard the same stories where the homeowner's frustrated in while they're trying to, quote, deal with the loan modification person, which I think until recently could be anybody multiple times. I think now they have to only have one person, supposedly, but initially you would
supposedly.
call. Yeah, and you get a different person every single time. And then meantime, the loan mod department did not speak with the foreclosure department, who would turn around and go to foreclose on them, and the homeowners, they're going, well, wait a minute, I talked to your loan mod department. My favorite thing is when people say, I have a verbal agreement. You know what? You know how hard it is to enforce a verbal agreement. Mitch, I'm going to go to you on that.
Well, and of course, what the process you described is what's known as dual tracking, where they're working you on a loan modification, and then they're over here working on foreclosure. The loan modification is absolutely a deception. They have no intent to give you the loan modification. There are very few loan modifications that actually go through. You got to understand, the banks are incentivized not to actually give loan modifications, but just to offer them. There's an incentive for them to offer them, but not to grant them. And fundamentally, many times, they don't own the underlying note anyway. How do you go to modify a loan that you don't actually own?
Well, right, that's scary because how do you know it's actually the correct foreclosing party? And if the incorrect foreclosing party wins down the road, that homeowner could be in trouble when the correct foreclosing party comes about, correct?
Well, one of my favorite quotes has been attributed to Mark Twain, and what he says is, it's not what you don't know that gets you in trouble, it's what you think you know that just isn't so. And so everybody operates under certain assumptions in terms of how the banks are working. We assume the banks have our best interest, that our interests align with the banks. In other words, people are confused. Why would a bank foreclose on me when they're going to lose money? My house is worth less than the note. It doesn't matter because that particular entity doesn't own your note. They don't care. They're going to make money because they're going to get all kinds of fees. They're going to late fees, foreclosure fees, all kinds of stuff. They're going to make a ton of money foreclosing on you. They don't care that the entity that holds the note may indeed lose money, because that's a whole different issue.
Right, and their lawyers also make money.
That's right,
correct?
lots of money.
That's where they make the big ones.
We live down in Fort Lauderdale, and we were just on the Jungle Queen. You know, if you've ever been to Fort Lauderdale, you got to take the Jungle Queen. But one of the houses we passed belongs to David Stern, who is the foreclosure king of Florida. He has a massive, almost a 200-foot yacht out there. The home is worth $25 million. And David Stern was known for forging and fabricating documents, or at least his office was. So there's been a lot of that. And has actually been disbarred. But he made an awful lot of money, because there's a lot of money in taking homes from people through foreclosure.
Whatever happened to right versus wrong? Well, just give me a quick summary. I'm going to ask you a quick summary of certain things, and tell me if any of the options allow a homeowner to walk away with money. A deed in lieu.
Well, deed in lieu does not allow the homeowner to walk away with anything. Typically, what it does do is it prevents a deficiency judgment, but there's no money. There's no money to the homeowner whatsoever with a deed in lieu.
Right. So basically, you're just turning over the property, poof, and that's it.
That's right.
All right. Explain a loan modification, how it really works. Do you walk away with money?
You don't walk away with money. If you could actually get a genuine loan modification, then it might make sense. The fact is that there's very, very few genuine loan modifications. What you see, even if the payments are lowered, is they'll add principal onto the back end of the note, and the payments are typically lowered only for a 5-year period or something like that. So I've seen people to get loan modifications, and they came in and their payments were higher.
Yeah.
Or they saved $10 a month, and yet they had this huge balloon at the end. It's a crazy business. Loan modifications they're not what people think that they are. And for most people, that's just not absolutely a good option.
No, it seems to me like it's a double victimization.
Yeah.
But in a short sale, they're basically selling the property for less than the value. Do they walk away with money?
Usually not. There could be some small amount of money in a short sale. The problem with short sales, this is an option that a lot of people look at and pursue. And again, it's a situation that the servicers are not incentivized to do short sales. They do happen sometimes, but for the most part, they don't. They don't happen, and they're continuing on the foreclosure case, the foreclosure docket at the same time. So a lot of people we've seen people that had short sales go on and they got foreclosed on because the short sale never happened.
Right, and in foreclosure, obviously, there's no money given. The bank is foreclosed. And Attila, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I just want to say that there's no attorney or there's no entity that could give you a guarantee, 100% guarantee that the short sale is even going to happen, for sure.
Right. Well, a lot of people want guarantees, and there's really no guarantee with anything.
No.
Okay. And, a lot of people are uneducated basically because they can't find the correct information, and
Correct.
A lot of times people or companies that they perceive to be honest and reputable are actually not. Does bankruptcy stop a foreclosure or save a house, save a property?
Well, bankruptcy doesn't save a house. It certainly can stop a foreclosure. So if you're facing a sale on your property, for instance, then bankruptcy can be a stopgap measure to postpone the sale. But that's all it does. Bankruptcy doesn't resolve a foreclosure. It doesn't prevent a foreclosure. It simply delays it. And bankruptcy doesn't even deal typically with the property itself. It deals only with the debt associated with the property. So those are separate issues.
Okay, now I see ads all the time for foreclosure rescue companies. What are they, and are they legit?
Well, unfortunately, when the foreclosure crisis hit, a lot of people sprang up with profiteering opportunities and took advantage of unsuspecting homeowners. And so what are known as foreclosure rescue firms are typically firms that promise to come in, and sometimes they'll do equity stripping. They'll take a quitclaim deed to your property in exchange for fighting the foreclosure for you. There have been a number of instances of companies like that. Foreclosure firms are regulated by the state of Florida. They're not allowed to take any money from you until they perform the services they say they're going to perform. There's a number of things, and people certainly need to be careful and watch out for firms, especially firms that want to take title to their property in exchange for fighting a foreclosure as opposed to actually buying the property.
Right, but one of the things you have to be careful, I found in the state of Florida, is it may be, quote, illegal or against the law. Unfortunately, most of the agencies here don't really help you get the money back, and that's why you have to be super, super cautious. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in a moment, and we're going to talk a bit more about it.
Time after time, I've done my sentence.
Are your credit reports a mess? Are debt collectors hounding you? Maybe you're in foreclosure or headed towards foreclosure and don't know where to turn. It's time to stop panicking. Take back control of your life. Make the first step by calling Credit Education Consultants today at 813-500-6064. That's 813-500-6064. Mention the word radio for a free 15-minute consultation. Don't delay. Call today.
Do you suffer from back, neck, or body pain? Do you suffer from migraines or have jaw or face pain? Has conventional medicine failed you? Were you injured or in an accident? Call chiropractic physician Dr. Dan Maddock at 813-935-1664. Dr. Dan has helped thousands of patients gain relief for more than 30 years. Dr. Dan is caring, gentle, and takes his time with each patient. He's also a past president of the International Craniopathic Society, a special certification of only 300 chiropractors worldwide. Dr. Dan helps patients from the neck up and the neck down. Dr. Dan accepts most insurance plans. Don't continue to live in pain. Call 813-935-1664 today. That's 813-935-1664 and get on track to better health.
Hello, I'm Jim Velasquez. Does getting a lousy 1% on your CDs make you sick to your stomach? Inflation is hovering at 3%, so what's really happening? Allow me, Jim Velasquez, to send you my free report. If you haven't reviewed your CDs in a while, don't get this report. It will break your heart. If you want to fight back and beat the bank, text RETIRE to 72727 for this free report. Let's beat the bank. Text RETIRE to 72727 for your free report.
Tampa Bay's Tan Talk. Entertaining and informative radio for the Sunshine State.
I've paid my dues time after time.
Welcome back to the Half Empty, Half Full Talk radio show. And I'm here with Attila Hevesy and Mitch Lindsey of the Dominion Property Group, LLC. Now, I want to talk a bit about loan mods. You know, the loan mods that were completed that were on the 5-year balloon that happened this year. What happened to all those homeowners?
Well, unfortunately, they're finding their payments raised. They're finding themselves in financial trouble. We've seen statistically that most people that get a loan mod end up back in foreclosure very quickly because the loan mod doesn't actually solve the underlying issues, and the reduction in the payment is not significant enough to actually make a difference.
Okay. Now, do a large percentage of homeowners even qualify for loan modifications, or most of them don't?
Well, again, you know, it's not really the matter of even qualifying. Did you know, Attila had mentioned, for instance, he had faxed in paperwork 5 times. The faxes for the loan modifications are actually in India. And so it's literally, it's designed to not get you a loan mod. I actually talked with a Bank of America person that was managing the loan mod department, and I said, how many loan mods do you guys actually do? He said, very few. Because it's not about the qualification; it's about the fact that the servicer, the bank, doesn't have any intention of granting the loan mod. It's all it's. In fact, I think there's actually a cause of action against the banks for what we could call predatory loan modification.
Well, okay, now I want you to clarify to people who are listening because we understand a little bit more than most people do in this sense, but you talk about the servicer. So explain. I buy a house, right? I buy a house from a lender, and maybe I'm headed towards foreclosure, and you're talking about servicer. Can you explain sort of that, I guess I want to say chain of title?
Well, the servicer is simply a middleman, an entity that's currently collecting the payments to whom you make the payments. And there's some real question as whether that entity actually has a legal right to even collect your payments. We're talking about loans that were entered into the secondary market, securitization loans, and loans that were securitized. And that's an awful lot of loans, especially from the period of, especially in 2004, 5, 6, all the way through 2008 especially. So what that simply means is the loans themselves, the notes and the mortgages, travel different paths. So the notes were intended to be bundled with a lot of other notes into pools of notes known as real estate mortgage investment conduits, where then bonds were sold on those pools of notes. Not the notes themselves, but bonds on the pools of notes were sold into the secondary market, into big money players, hedge funds, pension plan funds, sovereign funds. These are the infamous mortgage-backed securities. Now, there's a lot of issues with these mortgage-backed securities. Oftentimes, the notes themselves were actually never conveyed into the loans, into the trust. There's all kinds of legal issues associated with that. But the notes themselves traveled an entirely different path than the mortgages. And what the mortgage, understand this, the note is the legal obligation. Okay, the mortgage is merely a security document that pledges the property as collateral for the performance of the legal obligation. So the mortgages then travel different paths. They would be assigned from Bank A to Bank B to Bank C to Bank C to whatever it might be. And so that entity that maybe has that assignment and to whom you make your payments is merely the servicer. So they don't own the note. They don't have a right to modify the note or the ability to modify the note. And that's why oftentimes they'll say, well, we got to contact the investor, all those kinds of things. And so you're literally dealing with a middleman every time you deal with the servicer. And there's a lot of issues because in Florida, they either have to hold and own the note itself in order to bring the foreclosure, or under the new law, they at least have to have a power of attorney from the owner and holder of the note, which those are things that are lacking in many of these foreclosure cases.
Right, and for one of the things I've heard is a lot of times they don't have the original note, and they want the homeowner's permission to recreate the note. Correct?
Well, and unfortunately, in loan modifications, the paperwork you sign allows them to do that. So the purpose of the loan modification, if you do get one, is to
get you on the
get
hook
rid
again
of the liability for the prior note and mortgage. And so there's a lot of issues that homeowners completely don't understand. The whole process is designed, frankly, to abuse them and dispossess them of their property. But in terms of owning and holding the note, the original notes, when they first started in Florida with foreclosures, every single foreclosure in Florida had what's known as a lost note count, which merely said that we've lost the note, we can't find it, but there is a procedure under Florida law to reestablish a note, a lost note. So, but every single foreclosure case had a lost note count. So the whole issue actually went up to the Florida Supreme Court, and the Florida Bankers Association weighed in with a friend of the court brief in which they stated unequivocally that the notes themselves, their original notes, were routinely destroyed in the process of securitization. Now, magically, with all the foreclosure cases, they have the notes. So were they lying then or are they lying now? Well, the truth is they're lying now and then. So they lie all the time.
Yeah,
but the notes were routinely destroyed. The original notes often don't exist, but they're what is presented to the court oftentimes is a high-resolution color copy of the original note.
Right, and one of the things that seriously disturbs me here is that consumers continue to bank with these big banks that did this. And I find that disturbing. And I won't tell you what bank, but I will tell you from one of the big banks that did this, I withdrew all my funds 5 years ago because I said, how in good conscience could I support a bank by giving them my money to go ahead and pay lawyers to foreclose on these people? But a lot of people, they don't put the two and two together there. So, there were plenty of banks that didn't do it, but the big ones, they were all involved.
Well, they did. There was the Department of Justice in 49 states sued the biggest banks for all kinds of fraudulent activities. Robo-signing, a number of things were associated with the creation of false documents, et cetera. There was a $25 billion settlement that they entered into. Now, what most people don't know is that very little of that was actually cash. Most of it was in credits that could be given to homeowners. And the banks skated with basically a tiny slap on the wrist. They literally, the banks, in through this securitization scam, took billions, literally even trillions of dollars out of the economy. We're continuing to feel the effects. Yet none of these people, not a single one, was prosecuted and went to jail. Now, you remember the savings and loan scandal of the 1980s. Those guys went to jail. But now we're in the too big to fail, too big to jail scenario, and it becomes merely a cost of doing business. It's unfortunate what has happened, and I think we to our country and the way that money dictates everything now. And those that have the money have the power. Now, the people do have power, but not unless they wake up and see what's actually going on and begin to take some of that power back. And one of the ways to do it is to quit banking with the big boys.
Right. Thank you. Now, I want to go back just for a second. You know, we were talking about loan mods. Why don't the banks want to do the loan mods? I know, of course, everybody's making money on them trying to get the properties back, but do you think they actually want the properties back in the end, or is it all the people in between the banks? You know, is it the lawyers? Because I've also read articles that will say they really do want all the properties back.
Well, they do, because, again, in the foreclosure process, they make a lot of money. It's not the property itself. It's all the money associated with the process. Because what's often happened is they've neglected the properties once they actually acquire them. They'll throw people out and then not do anything with the property. Up in Chicago, Bank of America had to bulldoze almost 1,000 properties because they just let them all go they'd all been vandalized and run down and everything after they'd thrown the people out of their home. So it's not the properties, it's all the money associated with the property that they can do. And now, of course, there's all kinds of buyers that come in, they'll buy them. Blackstone Group's one of the biggest private equity firms in the country. They buy a lot of foreclosed homes and blocks from banks. But they're not interested, again, in the people. It's all about the dollars.
Well, true. And, you know, the point we made with the banks are controlling things, it's not actually the banks. It's the people that run the banks. So it's actually people. It's not that corporate entity under which they're hiding. So I question, why aren't some of these people going to jail?
Well, unfortunately, I have a very cynical view of our Congress. We have the best Congress money can buy, and they've been bought. And they're in the pockets of the big banks, and not necessarily every single one of them, but a pretty strong majority. And so they go along with the big banks because that's where their campaign contributions come from. That's where all kinds of special favors come from. And so there's a lot of things going on that the money interest, the money trust, is dictating to the people. And the people are blind. The people are unaware. They're completely just unaware of what's going on and how their freedom is being taken from them and how they're being manipulated financially for the benefit of a very tiny group of people.
All right, and when we go to the last segment in a few minutes, we're gonna talk about what you guys actually do. But before we go to break, obviously there were a lot of fraudulent mortgage and appraisal transactions that occurred during the time the bubble burst. And I know you can definitely talk on that. However, what scares me is that now you have the subprime, or they call them alternative mortgages, that are coming back, and it's only a few years later. And I feel like saying, wake up. Don't you all see what's happening? They're starting the same thing over again.
Well, of course they are. They made a ton of money with it before, right, and there was no penalty.
It's like saying to the consumer, the consumer wants to buy a house, and there are mortgage people that'll write a loan at $580. If you were to ever actually calculate out the interest that was applied on that 580 credit score and run a chart, you'll see you're paying 4 or 5 times the amount of that house after the 30 years versus if you have a higher credit score. And that's sort of another story, but it frightens me that people are not educated enough because no one is teaching the topic at all. So what do you think?
Oh, absolutely. People, again, they believe things operate a certain way, and they don't. The banking, Wall Street and the banking system, and again, it is people, absolutely people. Angelo Mazzillo, the chairman of Countrywide Mortgage, one of the worst offenders in terms of fraudulent documents, fraudulent appraisals, all kinds of money. He walked away with $500 million. I'd say crime does pay.
Yeah,
it pays very well. So why not do the same thing? It's a business model. That's how these giant corporations, and especially in the financial sector, operate. So the regulators are typically in their pockets, and they're not prosecuted, again, for being too big to fail. And so they can get away with all kinds of things that you and I couldn't do.
Right.
So they were very successful before. We've kind of weathered the storm, but we haven't weathered the storm, at least not from Main Street's perspective.
All right.
And so, yes, we're going back into it again.
Right. And when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about possible solutions. That's the part you really want to stay for. So we'll be back in just a second.
I've done my sentence, but committed no crime.
Do Do you suffer from back, neck, or body pain? Do you suffer from migraines or have jaw or face pain? Has conventional medicine failed you? Were you injured or in an accident? Call chiropractic physician Dr. Dan Maddock at 813-935-1664. Dr. Dan has helped thousands of patients gain relief for more than 30 years. Dr. Dan is caring, gentle, and takes his time with each patient. He's also a past president of the International Craniopathic Society, a special certification of only 300 chiropractors worldwide. Dr. Dan helps patients from the neck up and the neck down. Dr. Dan accepts most insurance plans. Don't continue to live in pain. Call 813-935-1664 today. That's 813-935-1664 and get on track to better health.
Are your credit reports a mess? Are debt collectors hounding you? Maybe you're in foreclosure or headed towards foreclosure and don't know where to turn. It's time to stop panicking. Take back control of your life. Make the first step by calling Credit Education Consultants today at 813-500-6064. That's 813-500-6064. Mention the word radio for a free 15-minute consultation. Don't delay. Call today.
Time after time.
Welcome back to the Half Empty, Half Full Talk radio show. I am here with Mitch, Lindsey, and Attila Hevesy from the Dominion Property Group, LLC. You know, we've been talking about the foreclosure mess. It's actually a popular topic on my show, but we also like to talk about solutions. We want to go from negatives to positives, problems to solutions, and it's hard to find good solutions when you have people who are panicking, when you don't know what the right source is, you know, and I try to do due diligence before I have anybody in my show and check you out to make sure, obviously, that it's a legitimate source for help. So I want to talk about how your group actually helps homeowners and what kind of, you know, what's the qualifications for someone to contact you?
Well, what we do is we purchase properties from homeowners that are troubled. Now, under Florida law, it's a true sale, so we're not purchasing property with the intent of them remaining in the property or having the ability to participate in the whatever the outcome is of the court case. So those things, you can't do those things. And so what we literally do is we actually buy the property. We offer homeowners an alternative to a short sale, to a deed in lieu, to an actual foreclosure. We'll come and buy your property. Even if you don't have any equity, we'll buy your property. We'll pay you real money to take over the property. Now, we obviously look for properties that we believe that our legal team will have an excellent chance of defending in court. We look for properties that are in very nice shape. We don't do rehabbing. But we're trying to craft and create a win-win situation. So the homeowner is actually able to walk away with real money, more than enough money to enable them to get a new place, get a new start, and we get ourselves a good buy. Now, it's a risk on our part, obviously, because we're going to go fight a foreclosure case with the intent of winning, but there's no guarantee that we'll win. But we've got a good business model, and it works. It works well for us, and it works well for the homeowners that we help.
Okay, is there a certain value to the property? I know it has to be in good condition, obviously. Is there a certain minimum value that you look for?
Well, we're looking for, on the very, very low side, maybe $150,000. But the truth is, I prefer properties that are more like $250,000 and up. Those are good rental properties. We get good quality tenants. But we will just, depending on the circumstance and situations, we might look at others. But there's no upper limit to what we'll look at. We recently just purchased one, for instance, that's worth well over $1 million.
All right. Now, how many homeowners have you helped in what time frame?
Well, again, we just recently started buying directly from the homeowner. So it's not that many, but yet we're going to be very, very aggressive this year in buying directly from the homeowners. Previously, we were acquiring primarily through HOA auctions, bank trustee deeds. There were some other things that we were doing. But now we've implemented this strategy to go directly to the homeowner because, frankly, we were paying all these other entities and no money was going to the homeowner. So it makes more sense for us to work directly with a homeowner, structure a situation that works for them and works for us. And I think Attila probably can kind of share a little bit of his experience in terms of
Yeah, why don't you tell your story?
Sure, I'd be happy to. My wife and I built a home in 2005, almost 4,000 square feet. And around almost just before 2009, I had a business failure. And it turned out I couldn't make the house payments anymore. So from about the tail end of 2009 right till the tail end of 2014, almost 5 years, we stayed in that property, did not make one payment. And believe me, we spoke earlier about the emotions. It was all from A to Z, every emotion, fear, anxiety, stress. I mean, it was not fun. Put stress on the marriage as well.
I'm sure.
It
Financial,
really
right?
Sure. So I was referred to Mitch and his group by a mutual friend. So I gave Mitch a call, and we had a couple conversations. He came to look at the house, and I knew that, I tried everything. I tried loan mods. As I said earlier, I tried short sale. That did not work. I also have a investment property that I tried a short sale on. I have a neighbor that specializes in short sales, and it didn't work. So I knew any day I would get a knock on the door, and time was going to be up. So that was stressful.
Now, did you have a lawyer at any time during this, or no?
I did have a lawyer, an attorney firm, actually out of Lauderdale, that helped through this gentleman that I mentioned, my neighbor, probably for about 2 years out of the 5. Okay, so I had representation, and they did help stall the process, and they were very, very affordable for me. So I knew it was going to be over any day, but when you're used to not paying a mortgage for 5 years, you just say, let's do it till it lasts. And along came Mitch and his group and made a very, very generous offer that was hard to resist, and we took him up on his offer. He explained it very clearly, and I must say he and his entity, his group, did everything that they said they would. So it was a big, big relief to my wife and I to help in the transition of finding a place to rent and moving someplace close by. Fortunately for us, knock on wood, we were able to stay in the same community that we were living in.
So in essence, it gave you money to move out and start over, because you read about these on the deed in lieu, the cash for keys programs, where they may offer you $3,000, and I think there was a new law that went into effect this month, or statute. Well, it uses the word "may," where they may offer you up to $10,000. Listen, I know plenty of realtors, and they all tell me they're lucky in all these years if they've had one that got any cash to be able to move. So these people are probably freaking out now. They're in a bad situation. Some of them have sent in the money for the loan modifications, for the verbal loan modifications, as the bank went ahead and foreclosed on them on top of it. So they think they had a loan mod. Well, now try to find an attorney to tangle that mess. It's usually too late by the time it's gone into foreclosure. And then, wow, you, the homeowner, you're out everything. You have nothing to walk away with. So this is a good example of how you could walk away with enough money to start over if you meet the criteria, correct?
Absolutely. $2,000 or $3,000 for cash for keys, to me, is an insult. I mean, this was legitimate cash. Not only did it help in the move and the transition of the down payments, we'll probably carry a year or two of rent payments also, if not more, and to help with my son's tuition in his private school. So it was somebody threw me a lifeline, and I took advantage of it. And to add to the story, what's incredible about how this all came about, just to show you how fortunate we were. Literally, this happened. Mitch and his group cut me a check, I believe, on the 3rd of December. I moved out on the 5th. On the 6th of December, in my mailbox, was a letter stating that they're getting ready to set the date for trial on my case. So if I would have just waited another week or so, I probably would have still received some funds from Mitch, but it would have been a lot less than I actually ended up receiving, because he would have known, that, hey, this is a lot closer to the end than we thought. We may not have enough time to prepare. So I don't recommend people wait too long when they have an opportunity like this, because things are speeding up, like Mitch mentioned with the Florida Unfair Foreclosure
Act. Yeah, that's what I should have called it. Yes,
yeah.
That's what that. Yeah, now Mitch, obviously that's a good example. How do you pay homeowners during the process once you decide you're going to? How do you do it? You have them sign over a deed. How do you take possession of the property, so to speak? Well, how does it work, the process?
Yeah, we have obviously some paperwork they sign. There's an agreement that they sign. We agree upon an amount that we're going to buy their right title and interest into the property for a certain amount. So they'll convey the property to us. It is via quitclaim, because we're not taking over the mortgage. So we intend to litigate the mortgage. They do have to vacate the property under Florida law, so they can move somewhere else. We do have other property, for instance, they might be able to rent. We can help them find a place. We do all those kind of things. And we'll give them time to vacate as well. So we can work out a time frame that's suitable for them, that's convenient for them. And so we'll pay them whatever we agree upon. We'll pay half up front when we get the documentation. We'll give them the other half when we get possession of the property.
Okay, so in a case like Attila's, you've basically, now you have the interest, you own that property. And then separately, you then have attorneys that will fight it. But it has nothing to do, win or lose, now with Attila, correct?
So it does have something to do with him, because one of the things that we do is we want to represent the homeowner's interest as well as ours, or the former homeowner's interest, because they coalesce, they co-align. So, for instance, in his case, and this is what we do with everybody, we're going to we get a power of attorney to represent their interests, which allows us to make sure that not only there's no foreclosure entered, but there's no deficiency judgment. We're going to keep the bank. That's the goal, is to keep the bank from entering a deficiency judgment against the homeowner. So they get the benefit of that. It doesn't cost them anything, but it makes sense for both us and them.
Now, what percentage of cases do your attorneys win? I mean, for you, because obviously you're giving money to the homeowner, so I'm assuming that there must be a pretty decent positive outcome on your end with the attorneys to be able to afford to, in essence, give money to the homeowner.
Well, there is, absolutely. And obviously, we wouldn't be in business if it didn't work. But the landscape is constantly changing, and so we know that the law is on our side. So even though we might, for instance, run into an issue in a local court, because so many of these courts are pro-bank. Again, it's not about justice. It's about expediting the foreclosures. So we'll take it up to the appellate level. It's based on the facts. So we have a very solid business model in terms of knowing how to properly defend and fight these foreclosures. But there's a lot associated with it. It's very nuanced. The problem is, because one of the things people think, well, why can't I do this? Well, number one, if you're the homeowner, the deck is definitely stacked against you. We come in as a third party. We come in and we pay good and valuable consideration for the right title and interest that we take. Then it becomes merely a matter of evidence, because it's does the entity attempting to foreclose actually have the evidence? They actually didn't pay anything for the property. They don't have any money invested. We have real money invested in it, and so we're going to challenge their evidence. We know how to do that. We present our own evidence. There's a lot of things that we do that frankly, most foreclosure attorneys don't do that make us very, very successful.
Right, and it seems like a very viable option in that, Attila, you actually got money, you left the property, and that helped take care of you. It gave you, because you have to, if you don't have money, you can end up homeless, and that kind of scares me.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Not only that, but it gave me the conviction to pay it forward and help other people. I actually teamed up with Mitch to help other homeowners have the same opportunity to do what I did. So that's a godsend.
Great. Now, before we close, first I want to thank both of you guys for coming up with an option. But people who are listening to the show, now we're nationwide. If you only help people in Florida right now, correct?
That's correct. Only in Florida. We're looking to expand to probably South Carolina before too long. But right now, only in Florida.
Okay. How do people get a hold of you?
We have a website, www.dominionpropertygroup.net. You can go there and get some information, dominionpropertygroup.net. You can also call me personally on my cell at 954-842-0700. And people in the greater Tampa area can call Attila.
Sure. My direct number for anyone in Tampa Bay area, or all the way down to Naples, or up to the Panhandle for that matter, and over to Orlando, is 813-610-6022.
Great. Well, join us every week for a new half-empty, half-full consumer advocacy talk radio show. Learn something new every week and get smarter faster. Be safe.
Thank you.
Time after time.